Let's talk some chess. Akiba Rubenstein was a Polish chess savant. He's often considered one of the greatest players to not win the World Chess Championship. He did have a World Chess Championship match scheduled with Emanuel Lasker in 1914, but it was canceled due to the outbreak of World War I. This game, though, took place 7 years earlier in 1907. He's playing against George Rotluwi, who's also a Polish chess player at the time, and Rotluwi opens us up with d4. We have d5 by Rubenstein, knight to f3, e6, e3, c5, c4, knight to c6, knight to c3, knight to f6, all very standard, normal opening stuff. Now d takes on c5, undoing a bit of the tension, releasing a bit of the tension in the center. Bishop takes on c5, developing with the tempo, and now a3, preparing b4 to kick the bishop away. a6, making some space for the bishop if needed. b4, and Rubenstein just brings the bishop to d6 instead of all the way back to a6, where it could be sort of trapped in by these pawns. Bishop to b2, fianchettoing the dark squared bishop, and now kingside castle by Rubenstein, so this bishop is nicely placed if an attack is to occur for Rotluwi. Queen to d2, getting the queen off the back rank, similarly queen to e7, and now bishop to d3 by Rotluwi. And this is sort of the first inaccuracy of the game. Rotluwi is playing fine so far. The problem with putting the bishop on d3 is that it allows Rubenstein to take the pawn on c4 with the tempo on the bishop. And now the bishop is forced to capture back, but now you've wasted 2 moves on this bishop. You've opened up the d file, and your king is still stuck on e1, and Rubenstein's going to take advantage of all those things. He begins with b5, attacking the bishop, forcing it back to d3. But now the rook slides over to d8, and the rook is sort of eyeing this queen on d2, which is on the now open d file. So the queen moves to e2 to get out of the rook's way, and now bishop to b7 by Rubenstein, fianchettoing the bishop and setting up an attacking bishop of his own. And now we have kingside castle by Rotluwi, and I want to just take a moment to appreciate the symmetry of this position. All of the pieces, I'm not going to highlight them all, but you sort of get the idea. All of the pieces are a mirror image of each other. The only piece that's different is the rook on d8 versus the rook on d1. Both sides have these bishops with a ton of attacking potential that are just controlling these long diagonals into the enemy camp, and it will be very important to see who can activate the bishop pair faster. I will note that usually when you're playing with the white pieces and there's a symmetric position, you are a move ahead, or at least it's your turn to make a move, because you obviously make the first move of the game. But here, Rubenstein, because of the sort of tempo that Rotluwi wasted with this bishop to d3 move, Rubenstein is 1 move ahead. He has the rook on d8, whereas Rotluwi has another move to put the rook on d8, and it's also Rubenstein's move. So he is a tempo ahead, or maybe 2 tempos ahead, and he takes advantage with knight e5, opening up the light square bishop on this long diagonal. We have knight takes, bishop takes, and now these 2 bishops are complete monsters on these diagonals. f4 trying to counteract the bishop, but the bishop just runs back to c7. We have e4 trying to lock both of these bishops away from the white king, the enemy king to these bishops, but certainly not the enemy king to Rotluwi. But now just rook a to c8, getting the other rook into the game. Both of these rooks now are on these very important open files. We have e5 attacking the knight and blocking this bishop out even more, but Rubenstein just sidesteps with the bishop to b6. This comes with check. The king has to run to h1. And this bishop controlling the g1 square. Don't forget about this bishop, because it'll be a very important piece in the attack moving forward. And remember that the king can't run away to g1 because the bishop is guarding it. Here, Rubenstein moves the knight to g4 to get it out of the way of the pawn attacking it on f6. And you might say, well, can't the queen just capture this knight? It's undefended on g4. But then the queen leaves the defense of the bishop on d3, and Rubenstein can play rook takes on d3 with a wonderful rook lift. So Rottweiler, sorry, not Rottweiler, Rotluwi. Sorry, that was a weird Freudian slip. Rotluwi instead plays bishop to e4, challenging this bishop on c7, and also now threatening to capture the knight on g4. So Rubenstein plays queen to h4, protecting the knight on g4, but now a reasonable defensive move, g3, attacking the queen, and also opening up a discovered defense from the white queen to the h2 pawn. And this is important because if you just make a silly move here like a4, then queen takes on a2 is checkmate because the knight is protecting the queen. So of course you have to worry about checkmate in 1, and g3 does that because it opens up a defense on the h2 pawn. So here you have to figure out how to keep the attack going with the black pieces. It's kind of tricky because the queen is being attacked, the bishop is being attacked, Both of these pieces are hanging, and it's not really clear how to keep the momentum going. So pause for a second and see if you can find the proper move for Rubenstein while I give you just a moment. Okay, so a reasonable defensive move is playing queen to e7, protecting the bishop, and now the bishop is not hanging and the queen is safe from the pawn here. But the move that Rubenstein played, actually, I didn't look at this line, so don't quote me on that. Maybe it's a terrible move, but it looks reasonable to me. But the move that Rubenstein played, the correct move in this position, ignores the queen being attacked on h4 and plays rook takes on c3, a wonderful rook lift, getting the rook onto a very excellent square and capturing a knight in the process. And what's crazy about this position is Rubenstein has three pieces that are hanging. The bishop is hanging on b7, the rook is hanging on c3, the queen is hanging on h4, and Louis gets to decide which piece to capture. If you capture the bishop, this is the least valuable piece, at least in general, maybe not in this position. Then you get rook takes on g3, and all of a sudden there's no more threat of pawn takes queen on h4. You can't capture the rook because the pawn is pinned to the queen, and this looks like a very brutal position to try to defend. So that doesn't really make sense. If you take the rook on c3, it gets even worse because of bishop takes on e4. This is a sort of line we're going to see a little bit later in the game, so I'm not going to go too deep into it now. But trust me when I say that it leads to ruin. So it doesn't really make sense to take these two pieces. Instead, Louis makes the best move, or maybe not the best move, but makes the most reasonable move. None of the moves work, so it's not like there's an escape here, but he makes the most reasonable move. He says, okay, if I'm going to be attacked, I don't want to be attacked with the queen on the board, so he takes the queen on h4 with the pawn. But now the second amazing move by Rubenstein. So actually now see if you can find the next move, the move you would have to find to sacrifice your queen on h4 to make it worth it. So see if you can find that move while I give you another second. Okay, there's some beautiful poetry in this combination of moves. Two amazing moves by Rubenstein, the rook lift to c3. The next move is a rook lift to d2. And this is an even crazier rook lift because it doesn't capture a piece. The rook is hanging on d2. It's obviously being attacked by the queen. And the problem here is that you can't really ignore this. If you, obviously the rook is attacking the queen and the queen is hanging, but if you try to run away with the queen, maybe to f3, then you get rook takes on h2, and this is checkmate because, again, don't forget about the bishop guarding this g1 square. The knight is protecting the rook, and that doesn't work. So the queen can't run away from the second rank. The queen has to stay in protection of the h2 pawn to prevent checkmate. So the best move here, the only move that makes sense, is just accepting the sacrifice and capturing the rook on d2. But now the point of the sacrifice becomes clear. The queen is no longer defending this light squared bishop on e4, so Rubenstein captures the bishop on e4, and all of a sudden the white king is running out of space because of these two incredibly powerful bishops unopposed on these diagonals, and there's just nowhere for the king to go. So these two squares are taken away, the king cannot move. Only thing you can do here is block, and here, if you block with the rook, then you just get bishop takes and you're in the exact same position, but you're down a rook. So instead, Louis plays queen to g2. And now for the last time, see if you can find Rubenstein's move. After he played this move, the game was over, the game was resigned. So take a second and find the third and final move in this amazing game. Okay, so maybe you were thinking taking with the bishop, but then king takes and the attack has actually sort of petered out, and now Rubenstein's actually down material, he's down the exchange. So it's not bishop takes queen, instead it's rook to h3, and in this position Louis resigned because checkmate is going to follow in a few moves. And what's the point here? What's happening? Well, let's say you just ignore this threat and just play a4, then rook takes on h2 is checkmate because, again, don't forget about this bishop guarding the g1 square. The queen can't capture the rook because it's pinned by the bishop, and the knight is protecting the rook, so the king can't capture the rook either. So you have to worry about this threat, but there's no way to actually do anything about it because you can't get any pieces in to defend the h2 square. The queen is blocking the second rank, so bringing the rook to f2 doesn't work because it can't defend through the queen. This bishop can't get to, the bishop's not helping, and nothing is going to work. The only thing you can do is, I think, literally just block. So yeah, give away all your pieces, bishop blocks, rook blocks, but then in the end, you're going to find the same mating picture after the rook takes on h2 with checkmate. So an amazing game, three stupendous moves. maybe two stupendous moves. Yeah, we'll say two stupendous rook lifts right in a row for Rubenstein, and just led to this incredible final mating picture. And the mating picture really is brought to you by these two bishops, which just controlled these, just dominated this diagonal. There are no pawns to stop these bishops, and they just made the game a nightmare for Rod Louis. So thanks so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Drop a like, drop subscribe. Let me know of other games you'd like me to review, and we'll see you next time.